Hi, Graham. You're on mute right now, Graham, so you will have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good evening.
Maria.
Yes,
Hi.
good evening, Graham. Welcome.
Graham, that is Dr.
Good
Saha.
evening.
Good evening, Graham. This is Jyoti Gupta.
Hi, Jyoti. How are you?
Good, thank you. I hope it's early morning for you there.
That's fine.
I hope you all have a cup of coffee. I hope you all have a cup of coffee with you.
I'm good? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
Hello, good evening, all the panelists. Vandana Sharma from JK Public School, Jammu.
Good evening. So, have we started live streaming?
Yeah, we are live.
Yeah, okay. So I would just like to say welcome to everybody and a few housekeeping notes before we start. Please make sure that your microphone is on mute for all those who are attending so that there is no distraction while the panelists and the speakers are giving their comments. Also, if you would like to, there is an option to pin the main panelists. So you can use that option while they are speaking. So then you would be able to see their comments. And of course, video also, if there is any distraction, please keep the video also on off. And on the right hand lower right corner is a present now button. In case you accidentally touch it, please make sure you exit out of that because that is an option which is only for presenters. I will now hand over to Dr. Jyoti Gupta, who will start us with the session. Jyoti, over to you.
Yeah, Dr. Saha, do we wait for Chairman Sir to join us?
Yes, Sir will join. Sir has already joined. Yes.
Sir is here. I saw him. Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I take this opportunity of welcoming everyone to this wonderful series of professional development program for all the educators across the country. And I also thank Chairman CBSE and Dr. Biswajit Saha and Maria for putting this program together for the benefit of all the educators pan-India. I will now request Dr. Saha, who is the Director Training and Skill Education CBSE, who was prior to joining CBSE in 2011, worked as an assistant professor at the Government Engineering College, Agratala. He's also served the National Informatics Center, Government of India, and Tripura Central University in various capacities. All the online trainings that are happening in this pandemic is due to Dr. Saha. I think he took no time in moving from the face-to-face offline training to the online training, and because of which we are able to hear the experts from the other countries as well. Dynamic as he is, putting all these programs together, I now request him to set the context of today's training. Dr. Saha.
Thank you, Jyoti ji. Respected Chairman CBSE, Sri Manoj Ahuja, Dr. Graham Kerr, Dr. Ananda Mukherjee, Methu Have, Methu Macken, Maria, Jyoti ji, and all my colleagues and CBSC, and of course, the school leader who are viewing us directly through Gmeet, or also who are viewing us through YouTube live streaming. It's a proud moment for all of us that despite of the different time zone, the experts from Canada are right at the early morning with us, and they are pretty senior peoples who are going to address through a panel discussions. And this kind of program is a matter of experience sharing, through which the Indian school leader and Canadian higher education systems, they are concerned with respect to the inputs from the school education, and our concern what way we are going to deliver to the future ready citizen. So that kind of situations is really healthy, and it's a great moment for all of us to welcome all the eminent panelists here. And of course, Chairman Sir, despite of his busy schedule, he agreed to inaugurate this program. This is first of its kind with Canada. Of course, a few days back, we did with Australia. And in the series, we are coming up with the other nations, America and others. So through that way, CBSC, under the leadership of Chairman Sir, and of course, a huge team of academic officers we had, and a training wing, academic wing, we are trying to reach to all our school leaders so that international dynamics of educations directly reach to us right at our doorstep. And of course, this kind of webinar or this kind of sessions will help us to understand the requirement. Other way, it's also give us opportunity to interact with the professors from different universities across the globe. And with this understanding, I think we will able to better address the requirement of our student at school, through which ultimately the entire world will be roll over, be it in India, be it in Canada or in other nations, because that global dynamics is very important. And the situation at which we are at this stage because of the pandemics, the concern for every country, for every citizens world over, it's equal here. Nobody can differentiate at any respects. So with this, once again, let me welcome you all. And I believe it would be great sessions altogether. Try to participate both through this Gmeet platform, as well as you are also, as that blog is very much there, you can raise your concern, raise your questions and inputs, so that ultimately the whole sessions become interactive other way. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, sir, for conceptualizing this program and for giving all of us an opportunity to get a wider perspective on education from across the world. I would now take this opportunity to welcome Shri Manoj Ahuja ji, Chairman CBSC, to today's inaugural function. Shri Manoj Ahuja is an IAS officer of 1990 batch from the Orissa cadre.
Jyoti ji, you are unmute. Jyoti ji, please unmute yourself.
Yes, sir. I'll repeat. So I take this opportunity to welcome Shri Manoj Ahuja ji, the chairman of CBSC. Shri Manoj Ahuja is an IAS officer of 1990 batch from Orissa cadre. He holds a BE Mechanical Engineering from Thapar Institute of Engineering and Technology, Patiala, MBA from the Punjab University, Chandigarh, and Masters in Public Administration from Harvard University, USA. He joined as Chairman CBSC Delhi on 20th of May 2020. Prior to joining as chairman CBSE, Shri Ahuja ji worked as the special director of Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration, Mussoorie. He worked in various capacities in his cadre in departments of agriculture, Department of Steel and Mines, and Food and Civil Supplies Department. His hobbies include of reading and sports, and I would also take this opportunity in thanking you, sir, for giving us this opportunity to interact with the educators across the world and also understand as to how they are braving this pandemic and what all are they doing in this time for the students, whether of school students or the higher education. Sir, I would request you to address the gathering now.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta, and let me also welcome all our esteemed panelists and resource persons and school leaders and principals who are attending this virtual professional development session, which is now you are able to interact with academicians and educationalists from Canada. Russell, can you just mute your mic? There's a little bit of. Yeah, thank you. So I think this is one of the initiative in this situation when we are faced with the COVID pandemic, to expose educationalists and school leaders in India to the thought and thinking which is available globally. I mean, these are uncertain times, and our responses have to be the best given the situation we have, given the uncertainty we have, given the information we have, and it is evolving and it is changing, it's iterating depending on what feedback we obtain about the steps we take. It's a very unprecedented situation, and besides other sectors like the economy and other issues, it's affected education, right from elementary education to higher education. And to ensure that whatever we do is in the best interest of the students, I think we need to really be very focused and think through the steps we are taking and have a strategic framework as to how do we address these issues. For example, just to ensure that the learning gaps are lessened, in the government of India, the finance minister of India had announced the Prime Minister's e-Vidya program. I think the two broad dimensions it has is it understands the need for having a blended approach at this time when physical classrooms are not there. So attempt is being made to provide comprehensive content, digital content, which is coherent. So you have content which is comprehensive across classes from kindergarten to 12 and coherent. We realize that some people can have a computer, some people will access on mobile, some people may see it on TV, some people may see it on radio, and for some we might have to still depend on the last mile connectivity through printed material. But the idea that the content is comprehensive, and secondly it is coherent. For example, what is available in the digital content is also available on the TV, is also available on the radio, and is also given to the child in a printed manner. So those are the two broad ideas behind it. The second thing is, given the fact that there is still uncertainty when the classrooms would open, it gives a lot of autonomy to the schools and the child to learn now. We had a very structured way of teaching, and there was a certain classroom and you go there and you learn the contents. And what we have here, let me be very frank, there's a lot of emphasis on, teaching to a test, or let's say content-based or rote learning, and the immediate need to shift to what we call 21st century skills. And that would require that the child is put in the center of learning. There's an autonomy to the teacher and for the student to actually think and have a larger agency in his own learning and learn in his own way. Now this environment, this pandemic, though it's affected us adversely, but it's also given us an opportunity to rethink and do things in a different manner and get the same results. Now, as an idea, it seems nice, but I think our challenge is to bring it to the ground and to actually make it work. For example, these are not new ideas. we've been given an opportunity because of the shock we have been given to the system. That's an opportunity. There's a crisis. We need to react. But I think our immediate goal is now to get a work so that these ideas are actually translated well on the ground. For example, people do feel there'll be a sense of anomie. They don't know which direction to take. And even if the alternative idea is given, then working out the nuts and bolts and enabling our teachers who would be at the center of the system to actually translate it on the ground is a challenge we are facing, including challenges like what would be the assessment system and issues related with that. So I do look forward. I think these kind of exchanges with top educationalists globally would be of great help to our school leaders, to people who are thinking about it, people who want to now bring about changes and ensure that it is in the overall interest of the student. So that's the challenge we are facing, and I'm really thankful to our resource persons and panelists who are from Canada. It doesn't look, it's early in the morning, you're looking very fresh and nice, so even though it's very early for you. So thank you very much, and we do look forward to this interaction, and I'm sure everybody who's attending would benefit substantially from this exchange. Thank you for once again giving me this opportunity to interact with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairman, sir. I know that I speak for all the panelists present here today when I congratulate Honorable Chairman, Mr. Ahuja, for allowing and encouraging such new formats of engagement, which will bring CBSE schools a lot of benefit, not just from learning within, but also because they are learning from without. We also would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Saha for conceptualizing this program and having the idea of this Canada session, idea which sets the stage for a new level of collaboration between our two countries. Canada and India have a very rich and a very long and diverse history in the education relations. But this particular program now helps us take it to a new level. So I would like to just once again say thank you for giving us the opportunity to deliver this program. I would also like to thank Dr. Sandeep Jain and the CBSE team who've been working tirelessly. I've seen mails go out and invitations go out in the middle of the night. So thank you to your whole team who are working in the background to help us make this a successful session, for all the operational support that they give. And also thank you to Dr. Jyoti Gupta for all her help with coordination for the Canada series that we have seen. Hello everyone, my name is Maria Mathai, and I take this opportunity to welcome you to the Innovate and Inspire Canada series of virtual professional development sessions, which has been organized by CBSE. Before we begin, one housekeeping note. Any question that you have that you would like to address to the panelists, please do type it in the chat box, which is there. And I would request you to add the name of the panelist that you are meaning that question towards at the beginning of the question so that it can be directed to the correct person. If it is a general question, then you can just say general at the beginning of your question before you type it. But I hope to see a lot of interaction and a lot of questions that we would be able to address at the end. In our daily lives, this pandemic has marked a big break from what has so far been our normal. Among the biggest questions this threat has posed us is, how do we continue to teach effectively when classroom teaching is at best going to be available very sporadically? We are kicking off this Innovate and Inspire series with a distinguished set of leading educators in Canada who have graciously taken out the time to share their thoughts on the topic, the future of education post-COVID. What is the new normal? A very brief introduction about our panelists. Graham Carr, who's the President and Vice Chancellor of Concordia University. Ananya Mukherjee Reid, Provost and Vice President Academic, University of British Columbia, Okanagan Campus. Matt Hebb, Assistant Vice President of Government Relations and Economic Development. And Matthew McKean, Director Education and Skills, Future Skills, the Conference Board of Canada. Thank you all for your participation today. The format for the discussion today will be that each of our panelists will start off by sharing their unique perspectives on the subject. This will then be followed by a Q&A. Our first panelist is Dr. Graham Carr, President and Vice Chancellor of Concordia University. Ranked as the top North American university under 50 by QS and Times Higher Education, Concordia is located in Montreal and is home to about 50,000 students. I would like to add here 50,000 students in the normal year. This year, I think it's a virtual home to all those students. He has served on the board of the Leadership Council for Digital Infrastructure and is also a member of the Research Committee of Universities Canada, which is a consortium of all Canadian universities similar to the AIU in India. I recently came across this statement from Graham, which perhaps will help us set our sights correctly for the discussion today. He has said, there is much more to do to create a more just society and brighter future for all through education. I'd like to invite you, Graham, to share with us your vision of this brighter future of education now.
Thanks very much, Maria, and many thanks to CBSC for the opportunity to participate in this panel. It's a great initiative, and it's a thrill to be with all of you. And I want to first of all salute all the efforts that I know you are making as school heads and principals on behalf of the next generation of students in India. I was last in India in November 2019, was supposed to have returned a couple of months ago had COVID not intervened. I think the reality is that we're all struggling with a new reality, and as educators, I think we need to be sources of hope, inspiration, and solutions, and the opportunity to have a chance to talk with you and to find out about different approaches that different countries and different states are taking around the world is useful for all of us. Maria has already said something about Concordia. Maybe I'll just add that Concordia has a very strong relationship with India. Like many Canadian universities, visa students from India are the largest single group of international students who attend Concordia, and about 24% of our students are international. And we have strong ties to a number of higher education institutions in India: IIM Bangalore, IIT Madras, the University of Delhi, the National Institute of Design. We're founding partners of the India-Canada Shastri Institute, and we're also affiliated with the Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and the Environment. And recently, just in June, we awarded an honorary doctorate to Ambassador Vikas Swarup, who was formerly India's High Commissioner to Canada. And 2 years ago, we gave an honorary doctorate to Dr. Kamal Bawa, the founder of Tree, and before that to Narayana Murthy, the founder of Infosys. So we have quite strong connections with India. I won't go on about Concordia. You can find out more about the university on the website. I'll just say that when the health emergency was declared in the province of Quebec in early March, we moved more than 2,000 classes, about 5,000 course sections online in roughly 2 weeks, like virtually every other post-secondary institution in Canada. Combined, we moved more than 2 million students online in a very short period of time. And at the university, we also shifted all of our day-to-day operations of the university's 7,000 faculty and staff personnel to a work-from-home environment as well. I have to say that I'm incredibly proud of what we accomplished at the university, as I'm sure many of you are, all of you are, about what you accomplished in your own contexts. It was a heroic effort by our faculty and staff, and remarkably, against all the odds, we had the largest graduating class ever, more than 6,000 students this May. We are now in a situation where we are still under a health emergency, but we've begun reopening our research activities on campus. We've already announced, we announced in early May that our summer sessions and our fall terms would be delivered mostly online, but accessible anytime from anywhere in the world, which is important for us given the international orientation of our student population. To this point, what we've seen in summer, again, somewhat defying predictions, is that the summer session at Concordia has been the largest ever registration that we've had for summer courses, even though it is entirely online. And I know this pattern is happening elsewhere in Canada and the United States too. And our fall registration numbers as of today are ahead of where they were on this date a year ago. So of course, a lot can happen between now and the official opening of term in September, but it does suggest that as we focus all of our energies on delivering high quality online, students are realizing that for many of them that will be the best choice for the coming fall. In Concordia's case, we have quite a lot of experience delivering online education. Unlike many Canadian universities, we actually have an online education production studio that we own called Knowledge One. It works to develop with our faculty all of the 4-credit courses that we deliver at the university, but it also partners with major companies such as Ubisoft Games, Saputo Foods, and the UN Environment Program in Nairobi to deliver online training courses elsewhere. Before COVID struck, we had 35,000 Concordia students registered in online courses, and 2/3 of our students had taken at least one course online before the COVID emergency. So the movement to online in our context was something for which we had some preparation. Our primary focus during the spring and summer and continuing in the fall will be to do everything we can to support our faculty members in developing online courses, because not all of our faculty members have experience in that regard. With regard to the future of education and the new normal, there are really 4 points that I want to share with you today. The first is from the perspective of lessons learned. I think that COVID was in many respects a great leveler for education, for all levels of education. It didn't matter what kind of an educational institution you were leading. It didn't matter how much or how little experience you had as a leader, as an administrator, as a professor, as a teacher, as a staff member or a student. The pandemic plunged everyone into an unprecedented reality. And the irony is that for the past 10 years or so, we in the higher education sector in particular have often talked about disruptive change. And it's been a commonplace to say that, well, we're living now in the 4th industrial revolution, which is integrating the digital, the biological, and the physical worlds. And we've been very focused for years on, as a society, on technology transformations, the impact of artificial intelligence, synthetic biology, robotics, cloud computing. As the New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman put it, while we often acknowledge the rapidity of change that we were experiencing, this change that has been happening in our digital world is very deep change, and it's happening in and to society on very fundamental levels. And I would argue that education, and I think that the chairman of CBSC alluded to this at the outset, education as a whole, I believe, has been slow to adapt to the deep changes that are happening around us, especially the move to the digital society and the digital economy. In some cases, and I know this is true in my own institution, educators have been resistant to deep change, preferring to stick with familiar modes of teaching, learning, and conducting our institutional affairs. I think COVID has brought a type of disruption that few people anticipated. It hit with astonishing rapidity. Its reach continues to grow as the ever-expanding daily caseloads suggest, and it is causing deep change in how we all think about work, travel, health, social relationships, the role of the state, the importance of research, and our level of preparedness for the future, which is where education comes in. And while we're all doing our best to adapt, the experience is highlighting, I think, a shared level of unpreparedness for disruptive change, that education systems around the world have become too comfortable in our habits and too comfortable with our standard modes of operation. And that's the transformative pivot point that we're at right now. The second point I would make, not surprisingly perhaps, is that it follows from my initial observation that COVID has created a unique opportunity. It's created a unique opportunity for institutions to design a new educational roadmap and deploy new approaches. And the institutions, the countries, the societies, the schools which succeed in grasping this moment to effect transformative change will be the ones, I believe, that benefit. While those that cling to the hope that we will somehow return to our familiar past, I think will be deceived in that hope and by that hope. Some educational institutions, and here I'm talking about the higher education system, perhaps in North America, particularly perhaps the United States, but also some of the private school systems. I think some educational institutions will also fail for financial reasons because they become over-dependent on activities that are no longer viable, or because the traditional clientele can no longer afford or is no longer willing to pay the price for the services available. So ironically, I think COVID has become a teaching moment for all of the education sector. And fundamental to that is the opportunity to get beyond the false, unproductive narrative that has tended to pit face-to-face education versus online education, which I think has been very detrimental to the digitization of education. We have the opportunity now to recognize that both in-person and digitally enhanced education have advantages. Students are, of course, disappointed that that schools and universities will be delivering their upcoming semesters online rather than in person. But one argument at Concordia, which we know is resonating with students, and we're in contact with them all the time, is that digital education provides a unique opportunity to align learning skills with the transformed workforce demands of a new digital and remote economy. At Concordia and many other universities, we've been working to provide the vast majority of our students with experiential learning opportunities in the past, work placements in private industry, the public or the not-for-profit sector that gives students a real education for the real world. Well, now that so many sectors of the economy have converted to remote work due to COVID, the form of digital learning has also become the content of learning. Students in online classes will develop not just new digital skills, but will increasingly have the opportunity to explore the new collaboration opportunities across borders, sectors, and institutions, much as we're doing right now. A digital education that is asynchronous, that's available anytime, anywhere in the world, is a potential game changer for certainly universities and other institutions in terms of developing partnership skills and allowing our students to become more adept global citizens. And here I would say that students are way ahead of educational professionals in their perception of the value of online education. A Canadian poll of university students in June showed that 75% of them believe that online learning can be better, equal to, or almost as good as in-person learning. And I'm pretty sure if we took a poll of faculty members and teachers, we would not come anywhere near that number. The third point I want to make is that successful education in the future, like successful healthcare, will become increasingly personalized and user-centric. The paradox of online education is that its detractors believe it simply massifies the student experience, making it even easier to become lost in the crowd. In fact, sophisticated online learning can be highly personalized precisely because of the digital tools available to monitor student progress. Additionally, there is the flexibility affords students to take greater charge of their education, to give students agency, as the chairman of CBSE said, to reach out more easily for guidance when they need it and support, including support from their own peers, and to progress through material at their own pace. Developing education systems that are truly student-centric is a reversal of the pattern of the history of education, which has tended to put the teacher and the professor in the center of the frame. And I believe, moreover, that students and parents will increasingly demand student-centered education in the future. We're already seeing the trend whereby parents and students are becoming much more savvy consumers and seekers of certainly higher education in the North American context. Many are dubious about online education, and they need to have their fears allayed. Others are dubious about the return on investment of attending universities that charge, as in many American cases, astronomical tuition, but cannot, at least in the immediate future, possibly provide an on-campus experience that justifies the expense. In the future, parents and students will demand a return on investment in terms of skills development and gateway opportunities into the workforce. And here I think the critical argument that we need to be focused on is that alignment between what online education can deliver and the needs and the future of work and the needs of a changing workforce. The last point I want to leave you with is that the post-COVID new normal will, I think, unfortunately, widen inequality in terms of access to education unless civil societies act vigilantly to ensure this is not the case. We are already witnessing in virtually every society how the COVID crisis has put unequal socioeconomic strains on populations that are vulnerable in terms of employment loss and insecurity, exposure to high-risk work, and poorer access to healthcare. And with our students, and we saw this at Concordia as well, we also witnessed the inequality of digital citizenship for students who could not make the transfer online because their personal technology was deficient, because their broadband access or internet was of poor quality. Inevitably, societies and institutions with greater resources will be best positioned to address these inequalities and capitalize on new educational opportunities. But for societies like India and Canada, where education is considered a fundamental public good, there needs to be a concerted effort to ensure that government addresses the gaps, the technology gaps that exists, and also incentivizes innovation in digital education. There are many pressures on the public purse in Canada. I'm sure there are many pressures on the public purse in India associated with the pandemic. But as always, we have to stress that education is a critical investment in the future. And increasingly, I think there's another reality that we need to be conscious of, and that is that there's a growing field of competition in education now, and it's not coming from other high schools or other universities, but increasingly from large corporate actors who see new business opportunities in learning and who have the technological capacity, the financial clout, and the brand recognition to become key players. And specifically, I'm talking about the credentializing that Google's Udacity or Amazon's AWS curriculum or Microsoft's Digital Skills Initiative are offering to potential learners worldwide. These tech giants are offering credentials in return for a mentored online course in topics such as social media marketing, web design, etc., topics that have credibility in the digital environment. And in North America, although the stock market is certainly wobbly at the moment, one place which is surging is investment in educational technology companies. I don't think the conventional education systems, yours or ours, have paid sufficient attention to this new force in the enterprise. And what Google and others are promising is essentially a transactional education, credentialization. And I think we need to reflect on that and reflect on the value proposition that we as high school educators, as university educators, provide our students on building whole citizens for tomorrow, on leading innovative research and creativity, and on reaching out to the student as a whole person, not just a number in the system. In the post-COVID reality, we need to continue to privilege these goals, but also to be radically different in our approach. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Graham. I think there are so many points over there which I know will resonate well with our audience that I'm kind of thinking, which ones do I pick? You spoke about the gap and inequality, and that is something that I know all our schools and CBSE is struggling with. You know, we are looking at a situation where students in the cities, students are in rural areas, students are in the mountains, students are in islands, and we are trying to align towards all of that. But I also thought it was very interesting what you said about students being disappointed. But the one idea that resonates with them is that this situation is allowing them to gather skills which are aligned with the industry. And getting employment or getting necessarily skills which will drive employment is, of course, very, very important in a country like India. So thank you so much for your comments. Our next panelist is Ananya Mukherjee-Reed, who is the Provost and Vice President, UBC, Okanagan Campus. She is an interdisciplinary scholar in the field of development studies. Ananya's work over the past decade has mostly concentrated on inclusive and people-centered development. Her current research project, in collaboration with the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, Geneva, focuses on the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the role of the universities in social change. In 2016, she was named as one of the 5 brilliant women in academia by Canadian Immigrant magazine. And I recently saw on LinkedIn that this year she is a finalist for the top 25 Canadian Immigrant Awards 2020. So we hope that you make it to the final, Ananya. And on the subject today, coming back to that, how are you seeing our education evolving in these times? Ananya, you're muted.
Yeah. Thank you, Maria, and very good morning to everybody. It's the perfect Calcutta tea time. And when Maria contacted me about this event, you know, my most immediate attraction was that I would be able to connect to colleagues and teachers and people I would like to have met otherwise, but in this way. So thank you so much for having me. All of the things that have been said before me, the context of education, is an extremely important part of our lives right now. The question that you pose is, what is the next normal or the new normal going to be like? The approach I would like to suggest is that we are all participants in shaping that new normal. So I don't want to accept that there is a new normal coming down the road and we must all adjust. And of course, education is the way to have that agency. I think our chairman spoke about that question of agency. So what I would like to present to you today are a couple of things we are doing here, and you know, our colleagues across the world are trying to do in terms of putting the student at the center of learning. And I will come to the end at the challenges, because of course in India, we're talking about at least 320 million students in the school sector. So it's something that is very easy for me to implement in my university is not quite the same in the context that we are talking about today. But again, you know, one of my learning growing up in India is that education is not only limited by our material resources. Of course, we need material resources, but there is something more to education that defies our resource limits. And that's the spirit with which I think we have to approach the pandemic situation today. So I have a few slides. I'm going to try and see if I can do this. Okay, so hopefully this will work. So it's just, my focus is really on the student and student well-being. So, you know, this is just the impact that we know as to what happened to our classrooms. So there is a sudden interruption of the classroom structure. The interactions, you know, which are so vital to our education, the teacher-student, student-student, teacher-parent, these are no longer possible. Our co-curricular activities have either been absolutely minimized or absolutely ended. There's a tremendous uncertainty that we're all experiencing, and this is experienced not only by our students, teachers, and parents, but by society at large. And all of this, of course, has a huge impact on the cognitive and emotional well-being of the student. And in the university sector, really all of the surveys that we run, all of the student focus groups that we do, the real question is that support for learning, which is cognitive, emotional, social, and so on. So that's my entry point to the few ideas that I'm going to share with you. So what do we need to do? So there are at least 4 tasks, and I've put them kind of in this numbered way, but they're all interconnected. And our challenge is, how do we connect them? So the first is, we do need to deliver the curriculum. And even though universities here have maybe a little bit more autonomy than, you know, in a school curriculum, but still we are constrained by the curriculum. We need to help students regain a sense of control. And that is really the root of the anxiety as well, which is causing this student impact on the student well-being. We also need to help generate the connections that have been lost. So suddenly, no end to the school year, no beginning of the college year, and no teachers, no parent-teacher meetings. So a lot of connections have just been severed. And also, we need to help foster a forward-looking perspective. Right now, all of us are kind of clamped down in the present. It seems like there is no escape. We're all trying to do what we can. But that focus on the future is very important for the student to be able to understand how he or she goes through this crisis. And the question that comes back to all of us, I think it was already mentioned in the opening comments, that how do we address student anxiety, particularly regarding examinations and assessments. And we are highly dependent on these assessments. And one thing I want to say before I go forward, it's not as if just the education sector can alone decide to do away with examinations or assessments or do something really radical here. These are actually social norms. So society, for prospective employers, everybody looks at a student through that lens. How well did you do in this exam? How well did you do in that exam? How was your aptitude test? How was your psychometric test? So tests are really kind of a social norm. And maybe this is a time led by the education sector. We need to question and rethink some of these social norms, which may be impacting our students negatively, and also may not be the best under all situations for them to realize their potential. So on task 1, on delivering the curriculum, I read all of the 2020 circulars that CBSE sent to its principals, and I thought there was quite an exhaustive list of approaches which are very, very creative. So the first one is mobilizing this, you need the whole village to raise a child, and it says really take this holistic approach to the student's learning environment, which is not only the school. The second was mobilizing the home, that even though the student has lost the school connections, our home connections have kind of become rejuvenated because a lot of us are having to spend a lot of time at home. And India still has the advantage, I would say, of multi-generational households. And there is a tremendous learning here possible in through this multi-generational interactions. Then it talks about activating the hand, heart, head curriculum, that is the learning, experiential learning, and the co-curricular learning, and also blurring the boundaries between what we call curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular. These are really global approaches that are emerging now, and I think we have a huge potential here to see for CBSE to take leadership here globally and see, on the scale that Indian schools have to operate, to what extent are these possible? What are the challenges? The next point was about mobilizing cultural resources. I'll come back to that. I am a great believer in culture as a force for overcoming a lot of crisis situations, particularly on emotional and cognitive well-being. And then there was all of the technology-related initiatives, and I've named only a few. The Vidyadan, Diksha, Swayam Prabha, these all seem to be could potentially work very coherently across the different kinds of divides that we see in India, and I'll come back to that in the end. I've just noted for you 2 other additional suggestions to consider when you're developing curriculum along these lines. One is the Poverty Action Lab at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. This is the lab that our most recent Nobel laureate Abhijit Banerjee has been associated with, and they have a particular approach to studying social issues like poverty, and they have come up with some suggestions about online learning, which I thought was quite helpful. And UNESCO has put together a COVID page on distance learning solutions. And UNESCO is, of course, taking this global view that, not every country and not every citizen in every country has access to the digital world in the way that we think. So what are some of the offline solutions? So mobile platforms, phone and offline solutions, and so on. And of course, in India, we have the radio and the television, which are great assets here. But that distance learning solutions, which combine online and offline possibilities, I thought was very useful. So I just suggest take a look at that. I now come to the second point, which in some sense, what I'm seeing in students is a primary goal that we should have as educators. At how can we help students regain a sense of control? And this will have to be done through the curriculum, although, curricular, extracurricular, co-curricular, whichever way we can do it. But that is the root cause of the anxiety that students are feeling. So the focus is to put the student in the leader role. And we already discussed a bit of that our traditional education is not about the student in the leader role. So how do we do that? So the one important thing about regaining a sense of control is expanding the student's COVID-related knowledge. And COVID-related knowledge is very dynamic and volatile. We don't know really. However, for the student to understand more and to participate in creating and delivering modules, and to have engage peer students or teachers or groups of or their family in this way will help the student understand the nature of the pandemic and the nature of pandemics in general. The second one is developing the students' media and information literacy. This, again, I think is key, given how much we are struggling with, real news and fake news and what are rumors and how people are reacting to that. Students must have this capacity to distinguish between high quality and low quality information. And again, here, lots of interactive methods are possible. I would say, virtual sessions with journalists in India, that would be very important. And simulations, role simulations, like can they be news editor for a day, and give it a simulation exercise where students actually learn what is news and what is not. I cannot emphasize the importance of this right now in this situation. The third thing is to develop active citizenship. And, there's many ways that school curricula already do it. There is in India also, in some states I've seen, a very interesting approach of the children's parliament, where children learn about the issues in the neighborhood and bring to the parliament and would see how that works. So I would think that if we could organize virtual simulations of parliaments, of, let's say, the Niti Aayog, the UN, this will give students, first of all, that interactive kind of leadership role, but it will also really teach them some of the things they need to have to regain the sense of control. The third important area is to help generate the connections that have been lost. So we can't generate the wonderful connections the students have in school, but we could inculcate more and more group work. And as you already know, any of the learning platforms are now offering different ways in which group work can be done. Some are more effective, some are not, but there's also, many ways that educators are now trying to do group work. And one of the outputs in the group work I think is very important is to understand COVID as a collective problem. So right now, all of the messages that we are getting is about what we individually need to do to protect ourselves or to stop the contagion. But there is a bigger understanding to be had about how this is a shared problem and shared everywhere. And this needs to be built up right from the student to the family to the community and so on. And here also, if we could, through group work, encourage students to find interactions anywhere they can. Again, family. A lot of our students live in these multi-story buildings. Is there a possibility of creating small communities respecting the physical distancing guidelines, where students or children can take leadership about spreading the communication on COVID? And this is already happening in many ways. It's just that if we self-consciously and proactively embed it in our education system, that will have a different impact on scale. Now, cultural interactions, again, this is, I think, India's, India has unlimited cultural resources, and also the way that the new online platforms are bringing together people in their own residences, own living rooms, into a common cultural platform. If any of that could be recreated through the school, I remember growing up, and I'm sure it hasn't changed that much, that every year, every school would have an annual function or, term end functions. And these were great ways to not only to let students have that creative expression of their talents, but also to come together in some way. Now, if these are not possible, this is a huge loss, I think. And so are there ways in which we could think of these cultural interactions. And then, now, as we are seeing today, that the globe is our platform, cultural interactions can be built globally. And I think children interacting through cultures would be a fantastic way to regain some of the connections that have been lost in our traditional education models. The final thing, and again, I cannot emphasize this enough, the importance of generating a forward-looking perspective. So we all need to tell ourselves that there is something beyond the pandemic. And the students who are growing up, whose experience right now is very dominated by this experience of being in the pandemic, we do need to understand, we do need to find ways to get them think 5 years, 10 years in advance. And also, we know that now whenever a person goes for an interview, they're often asked questions like, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? So that forward visualization is very important. So I'm thinking of this at 3 levels. The one is visualizing one's own future. What am I going to be? What is my idea of success? What are my aspirations? And in my previous institution where I was dean, we held a Twitter contest about who are you going to be in 2032 or 2025? And we had some fantastic responses from students who were articulating their vision. And it's a great way for educators to then bring the student to you and say, well, let's see, what do you need to do to be there in 2025? And this builds just another kind of connection, another kind of vision sharing. Family's future.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but we are just 1 minute.
Yeah, my last slide. So visualize the family's future, right? And this could be done through essays, short posts, videos shot on the phone. Our students are extremely adept at that. And then visualize the larger future. Well, how do you see the country's future? How do you see humanity's future? And, the young generation is very thoughtful on these things. Just providing some ways to bring these within the educational system would be very important. This is really my last slide. I was just trying to put together some challenges and solutions so that, we don't think that there's all these good ideas, but we can't really do anything because of the real concrete challenges that we have. So for India, scale is a huge issue, but scale is also gives us the opportunity to take leadership in ways that, in a smaller scale, you may not be able to do. There's a digital divide, there's huge socioeconomic disparity, there is multiplicity of language, there is unevenness in the training of teachers, and there is the dependence on examinations as the primary method of assessment, particularly these large final examinations. So my hope is, the solutions have already been mentioned, but there's just 2 things, using of the TV, radio, etc., that we can do. But the twinning of schools, in North America, there is, at least in Canada, I've seen there is this a way of twinning cities. So a city in Canada can be twinned with a city in Vietnam or in India. So could we twin schools within India where they have different types of resources or uneven levels of resources that they can share? And also through teachers or through volunteers can we create a core of digital volunteers. And here I think our retired school teachers could play a huge role if they can be a core of digital volunteers to, bring together some of these activities or coordinate some of these activities. And then on the examination question, I think CBSE is an entity that is ideally suited for, of course, rethinking, but also kind of leading a global discussion of the assessment, and not only about examinations, but about how the world views these assessments, how our employers view these assessments, and is there a different way we can reimagine them from the point of view of the student's cognitive and emotional well-being, and the student being able to realize his or her full potential through a diversity of assessment mechanisms. So I will stop here and hope continue the discussion with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ananya, for your comments. Our next panelist is Matt Hebb, Assistant Vice President of Government Relations and Economic Development at Dalhousie University in Halifax, where he co-leads Dalhousie's strategic priority to foster innovation, entrepreneurship, and creativity. Matt has been instrumental in several innovation-linked projects, and under his strategic leadership, has contributed to expanding entrepreneurship within Dalhousie, deepening partnerships with key players in the innovation ecosystem, and establishing Nova Scotia as the first Canadian jurisdiction accepted into the MIT Regional Entrepreneurship Accelerator Program. So, Matt, is 2020 the year that we in innovation will innovate and inspire?
Thank you, Maria. And first, let me just say thank you to CBSE and congratulations for this initiative, which I think is actually a really great innovation and one that might have been difficult to contemplate just a few short months ago. Chairman Ahuda, Dr. Saha, Dr. Gupta, and to my fellow panelists, it's a real pleasure to be with you. We've already heard some incredible insights from my colleagues, so I will endeavor not to repeat those points, but maybe just try and add some additional thoughts in, and I'll try to keep it quite brief. Just as a quick overview to begin with, a quick introduction. Dalhousie University is in Halifax, Nova Scotia on Canada's east coast. Our new president, Dr. Deep Sani, just started at the very outset of just before COVID hit. So he's had an interesting introduction to us and would want me to certainly share his greetings here with you this evening. We have about 19,000 students at Dalhousie across 12 faculties. We are a medical doctoral university. We are a research and innovation intensive university, one of the universities that are part of Canada's group of 15 research intensive universities with about 90 or so master's programs and over 40 PhD programs. Similar to my colleague from Concordia, we have a great deal of diversity in our student body because over 60% of our student body comes from beyond our province, either from the rest of Canada or about 25% of our students come to us from international destinations, including a significant number of students from India who mostly join us for graduate studies. So what is the new normal going to be? I think we know this, and I actually thought that the chairman's opening insights were very astute. There's so much fluidity in the current dynamic. Change happens with such rapidity and with such force that it's really breaking down what we would have considered for a long time barriers to change, and in this moment of such fluidity, I think it's difficult to predict exactly how things will settle out. But here are some thoughts from here in Nova Scotia. I'll offer some thoughts about our context here, because I think that the context around educational institutions is actually quite significant, because it has such a profound impact on what it is that we are able to do. So here in Nova Scotia, we were actually the last part of Canada to get a COVID case. And so we've lagged about 2 or 3 weeks behind the rest of the trends in the country. So that's been a bit of a benefit for us. We've been able to learn from others. And after quite a severe shutdown, we are now in a period of gradual reopening. We've had virtually no new cases for about 3 weeks now. There's only 2 active cases in the entire province. And so we still have a requirement that anyone coming into the province from outside of Atlantic Canada has to quarantine for 14 days, a process which, if that persists into the fall, means that we will take a coordinated and supportive approach to students who are coming in and who have to undertake that kind of quarantine before they can be out in the community. So this is one of the ways in which we need to respond to the situation. But we're seeing more and more restaurants opening, we're seeing stores opening, we're even seeing the cricketers out on the pitch. And so around the university, we're starting to see signs of more and more economic dynamism, more and more social life. However, within the university community, we continue to take quite a cautious approach, in part because the way that we approach COVID has to be managed as an occupational hazard as much as anything else. So we are slowly returning some functions to campus, particularly prioritizing things like research labs. But a great many of us, including myself, will continue to work from home, and I expect that will continue to be for quite some time. We will be reopening our libraries, our athletic facilities, dining halls, and so on, with careful distancing rules, disinfection and cleaning regimens, and social distancing rules in place. We will have reduced capacity in our residences so that there can be more social isolation in the residence facilities, and we will set aside residence facilities should the need arise to isolate anyone who actually develops COVID. But that all said, we will be operating in a predominantly online environment this fall, and we have been this summer. We will make some exceptions in cases where professional accreditation requires that there be face-to-face interaction. So that we'll see some of that in our Faculty of Medicine or in our Faculty of Nursing, for example. But otherwise, we expect to deliver our courses entirely online, and as my colleague from Concordia said, interestingly, we've seen higher than ever numbers this summer, and so far very promising numbers for this fall, which I think suggests that and this is a point I'll maybe return to, that higher education continues to be something that, as we've seen historically, people gravitate towards in times of economic uncertainty. As we move to online environments, and we've heard a number of really interesting insights about the kinds of opportunities that this opens, one of the things that we are working hard to strive to maintain is that sense of affinity and connectedness amongst students and teachers. Ananya talked about that disruption of connectedness. And so one of the ways that we're doing that is building online community through student peer-to-peer mentorship, and looking for multiple ways to allow students to actually help participate in the design of this new online sense of belonging in the community. And as others have mentioned, we have to do this in a way that challenges us to be much more mindful of accessibility issues in the way that these resources are made available, when they're made available, and how they're made available. At this point, I should say we are currently in the middle of deliberations about what, if anything, may shift for our winter term starting in January of 2021. And as I stand here today, I suppose it would be very difficult to imagine that things in the winter will look very different from how they look in the fall. Among the great uncertainties that we all face is what happens if there's a second wave or a resurgence. And so a lot of what we're planning for is the ability to adapt and respond to shifts in how this may go in the fall. Here are a few observations that I will share, and then I'll hand it off to my colleagues on where I think we sit. The first one, maybe this is a bit of a truism, but I do think that in this moment, higher education is perhaps more important than it's ever been, and accepting that there are new entrants coming into the education and training world, and new modalities of learning and so on. I think that as we see not only the epidemiological impacts and health impacts, but also the economic, social, and environmental impacts associated with COVID, I think all of these kinds of uncertainties and the transitions that are coming with them really underscore the importance of higher education and the investment in human capital, both individually and as communities and populations in responding to this period of change. The other thing I want to say is that I think that notwithstanding the tremendous opportunities that digital and online bring to us, I think that place will continue to matter a lot. I think that learning will continue to be a community-rooted endeavor, and I think that it will still be very important that schools and universities and colleges continue to be places where higher learning can happen. I don't think that is going to go away. I think that the social and community dimensions of learning will continue to be very important, and I hope that, as my colleagues have said, that we will be intelligent and insightful about the ways we leverage new opportunities from the online moment that we've been sort of thrust into to enhance place and what place means in higher learning. I certainly agree that online and digital is here to stay. I agree fully that we're not going to sort of come out the other side of this moment one day and simply retreat to a bunch of older ways of doing this. And I'm happy to report that what we hear is, even from some disciplines that perhaps were most resistant to online prior to COVID, because as has been pointed out, this is not a new discussion, but we're seeing actually that many professors, many instructors, as well as students, are welcoming the flexibility that comes with online and some of the new approaches to learning that are made possible. And so I do believe that these are with us, and they will allow for new approaches, hybrid, blended, and other approaches that will allow us to better individualize the learning experience, be more attentive to the accessibility of learning. I think asynchronous learning will allow us to think about how learning is available in different places at different times and through different means to different audiences and learner populations. And I think that's really, really important. So I will leave it there. I know we're running a little bit short on time. So I think, of course, there remain a great many unknowns, and so perhaps one of the key constants for us going forward will be to preserve our ability to bring on new insights as we learn them and deploy those quickly. I think the speed at which we're realizing we can do things is perhaps one of the greatest innovations in a sector that's not necessarily historically been known for its speed. So thank you again for convening this. It's certainly a pleasure to be a part of it.
Thank you, Matt. And I think one point that you mentioned is something that I think all the schools and principals are grappling with. On the good days, like, everybody is hoping that the school will come back to normal. But on the bad days, you have these moments where you wonder that whether we will ever go back to school as it was, where students, teachers, parents running through the corridors, the sound of the kids shouting will come back. So the fact that you think that learning will continue to be a community-rooted endeavor is, I think, something which will give a lot of us hope. So thanks for that. Moving on, to paraphrase L.P. Hartley's famous quote, "The future is a foreign country. They do things differently there." Our last panelist today attempts to predict this future in the skills division. Dr. Matthew McKean is Director Future Skills and member of the senior leadership team at the Conference Board of Canada. He leads research, business development, and stakeholder relations for the not-for-profit think tank, Conference Board's Education and Skills File. He is also part of the leadership team of Ryerson University Blueprint ADE Consortium that has been selected to set up and run Employment and Social Development Canada's Future Skills Centre. He is also on the National Advisory Committee for the Prime Minister's Awards for Excellence in Education. So Matthew, can we do it differently? How do we prepare our students for this new future?
Thank you, thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I'm hoping the sound is okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you to the CBSC. Thank you, Maria. It's lovely to see you. Thank you to my panelists. I was with Graham in India back in February, not in the November trip. He rudely didn't invite me to that one, but I would have been thrilled to do this panel in person in India, but under the current circumstances, this is pretty good compromise. So thanks for that introduction. I'm cognizant of time and very keen to hear to do the Q&A. So perhaps I'll be agile here and adapt what I was going to say and shrink it down to focus on just a couple of things. So the future, from our perspective as an applied research organization looking at skills and future skills, the future is social and emotional, and it's also experiential. And in that way, I'd say almost really, although there will be a new normal after all of this, after COVID, in this way, it's also a case of everything old is new again. When we set out to do a lot of this work on social and emotional skills training and experiential learning, part of it was inspired by listening to what employers across Canada were saying. The Business Council of Canada, every couple of years, which is a membership-based organization made up of the top 95 companies in Canada, does a skills survey every couple of years. And what we kept hearing from that skills survey, when they were responding to questions about what skills do they find most lacking in their new hires, it was time and time again human skills, the social and emotional skills of new hires, the communication skills and collaboration and teamwork and virtual collaboration like what we're doing here. It wasn't technical skills. And the technical skills conversation has dominated for a long, long time. So we started to dig into that and look into that. And historically, of course, social and emotional skills have been the domain of K-12. And once students leave K-12 and go into post-secondary, then they still get those skills, of course, but it's much more through osmosis. But they were supposed to be learning those skills in that, much more applied way in K-12. And we started to investigate, and we used as a sort of a test case Canada's business schools. And we were looking at Canada's business schools to figure out the extent to which they were teaching social and emotional skills. And we interviewed, and this is a big sample size for Canada, but about 1,000 people across business schools, deans and students and graduates and professors. And of course, they were all cognizant of the fact that social and emotional skills are important, but also cognizant of the fact that they're really hard to teach. Technical skills are things that you can teach and assess pretty quickly and figure out if somebody has them. How do you assess whether somebody is a better communicator after putting them through a module or a course or a case study? And so this became an interesting problem for us. We recognized through digging deeper into the literature that social and emotional skills are malleable. Adults can learn them, believe them or not. We're not fully formed as 6-year-olds and then we're kind of hermetically sealed. We can evolve and adapt through life experience and through education and skills training. But when it comes to the human skills, to those social and emotional ones, it's much harder to actually train them, teach them in adult learners. Much harder to assess them. And there's actually a critical dearth in assessment models. And I'm seeing a lot of questions flow by on the bottom of the screen around assessment or questions around assessment. And this is one of those critical areas where there is a compelling shortage of assessment on how do you teach and assess social and emotional skills in young people. And so that became a big part of the project that we're doing. And we have released some research and some reports to identify the challenges related to teaching and assessing social emotional skills. We're about to release what we're calling a taxonomy of social and emotional skills, where we've sort of dug in and looked internationally for what we figure are the best assessment tools to date. and we're going to create sort of a hub of social and emotional skills resources, both for Canadians and be available for free internationally. But there's a lot of work to do there. But the other challenge, of course, I think is that second point around the experiential learning. When we asked employers, and the Business Council of Canada asked employers, for the past number of years, what are they looking for in new hires? It was co-op and experiential learning opportunities and some kind of work experience before the students, the new hires, got into the workplace. That's a current new, that's always been a challenge in Canada. We think we get about 50 to 60% of students in Canada get some kind of co-op or experiential learning opportunity. The federal government recently invested over $800 million in federal budget 2019 and to ensure that 100% of Canadian students in their first diploma or degree get some kind of experiential learning opportunity. But what we recognize there, of course, is that that's certainly easier said than done. And how do we do that? And how do we help employers, particularly small and medium sized enterprises, take on co-op students and mentor them and provide them with quality work integrated learning opportunities. But what we recognize is that it's emphatically necessary because that's actually how young people or young adults develop those social and emotional skills in the first place. You can't read about it and learn in a book and then get tested on virtual collaboration or your presentation or your communication skills. It's something you learn by doing. And so the wheels were turning on the social and emotional skills conversation in Canada and on the experiential learning conversation in Canada pre-COVID, in midst COVID and after. They will be even more important. And I think the COVID-19 crisis has underlined the importance of the social and emotional skills of people during work in terms of resiliency, of leaders at this time who need to be better communicators and more authentic, of government leaders who need to be all of those things. The challenges and the need for social and emotional skills will be even stronger. But we have a lot of work ahead of us in terms of figuring out how to curate and develop those skills in young people. So that's kind of the if there's a certain symmetry here in me going last, I think, is to say, while everything my three co-panelists have said is true, I think I'm also here to kind of I'm here to kind of problematize everything you've said. Because what we know from research is that online and virtual collaboration, online learning and teaching is effective. We know though to date, the research shows it's a nice supplement to real life experience. We know we can provide online social and emotional skills modules, and we're testing a number of them, but they're a nice supplement to real life experience. So that new normal that we return to after COVID is going to have to include some kind of real life experience here, not a full scale replacement with the virtual. So maybe I'll leave there so we have at least 8 or 7 minutes for questions.
Well, thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Matthew. We have had some excellent ideas shared by our distinguished panelists, and I'm sure we've all got our own set of insights and perhaps some answers. Our leading school leaders and educators who are here today have some questions for the panelists. So I would say let's get started with the Q&A. I would ask Mr. Jolly, who was there at the beginning of the session, if you can unmute yourself and be ready with your question. In the meantime, I will take a question which has been sent online, which is addressed to Graham. Namaste, Graham. How is your virtual classroom look like? And what is your strategy to meet the minimum learning outcome respecting the vast diversity in Canada? And you also spoke about digital citizenship. Is this a reality in Canada? And is this the responsibility of the government to deliver that?
So thank you for the questions. I guess in terms of creating the virtual environment, as I said, we have some experience with creating online course content in the past, and our approach, we've been offering courses in person, the same course material in person and online for a number of years. So the issue is not the content; the issue is adapting the modalities of delivery. I think one of the things, and this goes back to some of the points that Nanya was making earlier on, that we also realize is increasingly important, and this ties into Matt, is that the online experience for students has to go beyond simply course material. We're trying to create a much different virtual community for our students, one that is enabling peer-to-peer connections, one that's enabling a different kind of mentorship, one that's in some cases enabling access even to cultural institutions in Montreal through collaborations with the Museum of Fine Arts and others, and certainly to provide more robust support for students, student mental health issues, the kinds of pressures that were referred to by Ananya earlier on that all people are feeling as a result of COVID. So I think what's changing in terms of our approach to online education at the university is trying to imagine a broader online environment, not as a replacement for face-to-face, but as a complement to face-to-face, and something that we need to be more familiar with going forward. And so that's a different kind of reflection. That's also a very different kind of reflection for our faculty members who need to think differently about how they're interacting with students in an online environment than may have been the case face-to-face. With regard to digital citizenship, before COVID happened, we were already moving at Concordia to try to lead a digital initiative that would create a fully digital environment for all of the activities at the university. And one of the things that we we did surveys of our students. Our students believed overwhelmingly that acquiring digital skills and digital competencies was essential to the future of their work even before COVID. But in the same survey, they also demonstrated very clearly that they didn't think universities were doing a good job in equipping them with those skills. So we were conscious of that obstacle before COVID hit, and it simply accentuated the need to try to rise to that challenge in the future. Canada, for all of its wealth and opportunity, also has large sections of our population who are left behind and marginalized in terms of their access to digital technology, in terms of their access to broadband, whether it's Indigenous populations or populations living in Northern Canada or populations living in rural Canada. So I wouldn't want to leave the impression that somehow Canadian democracy is a digital democracy. It isn't yet.
Thanks, Graham. Mr. Jolly, are you available for your question?
Yes, ma'am, I'm available.
Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you to all the panelists for giving us today a very beautiful session to learn more about what does the future look like. My question is, sir, that we understand that development of the 21st century skills has always been in mind, and it's required more than any time else. But the colleges, while taking admission in first year, they ask for transcripts with marks, high grades. And unless until a child doesn't have high grades, he doesn't even get a call or a chance to get an interview. The interview comes second, and the priority is marks and grades. So when will this whole system change of asking for marks and grades? Because till that doesn't change, the students will never focus on skills. They will always focus on getting high marks because their entry into college depends upon that. So when can formally this change come through? And what do you think is the right way to go? Because we have a mixed model now where priority is grades and skills is not the priority, though it is required. So I think we have to turn this around, and this can only happen through colleges. If colleges turn this around, then schools will turn around. Otherwise, this change will never come. It will totally be a imaginary situation for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. A very, very quick response, Ananya, because we talked about grades and the importance on that.
Yeah. So this year in Canada, when the high school ended abruptly, most universities, I think, have decided to admit students in the US and Canada without the final grades. This took some work, but we did it. But as I said, that this can't only be schools and colleges. This has to be a social movement. Everybody, from the employers to the college schools, parents, everybody has to come together to look at our students differently. And Maria asked for a quick answer. I'm happy to come back and discuss this more if I have an opportunity.
Thanks, Ananya. So I just wanted to check, Dr. Sandeep Chen, are you available? So, and also a very quick question to the panelists. We are a bit off time, so I wanted to check, would you be available for another 5 minutes if we take one more question, one or two more questions and try to squeeze it in? Okay, thank you. So I have a question from Mr. Dixit, Principal Maharshi Vidya Mandir, Janakpur Road, Panna. And he asks a question that I think a lot of people have asked on the blog, which is how do we get the students to practice for practicals, labs, music, dances, where the real life experience instruments are a very important part of the whole teaching learning experience. So would one of you like to take that? Since and then aligned with this question has also been a lot of queries on how do we handle situations in rural India where there is lack of access, lack of technology. And I know, Matthew, that one of the things that you've been doing is traveling across Canada, working out, working with institutions and communities to seeing how and what are the challenges and how to develop your future skills strategy based on the challenges that you are experiencing. So would you like to maybe comment on that?
Sure. Sorry, the sound cut out at the beginning, so I missed the beginning of that question. Something about arts?
Something about the practical component, the labs, the music, the sports, which is also a very important part of education and which contributes to skills.
Right, sure. Yeah, it's part of the Future Skills Center initiative, which was launched also by the federal government a few years ago to create research and pilot funding to help gain access to labor markets and skills for vulnerable populations and to help upskill Canada's sort of mid-career workers who might be made redundant by artificial intelligence and machines and that sort of thing. Conference Board has got a fairly robust research agenda and also a convening agenda. And so this past year, we traveled across Canada when we spoke to our provinces and territories and we asked them, how can we best engage you? They said, please come to us. And so don't have one event in Ottawa or Toronto and expect everybody to come to you. So that's what we did. And we went across Canada. We almost finished it. We didn't get to BC, sorry, Ananya, or to Quebec. Graham, coincidentally, that's just pure coincidental. They were the last two stops on the tour. But what we heard loud and clear is that there's no one size fits all approach for skills training, whether it's in arts or whether it's in STEM, and that we need regional approaches. The federal government in Canada often likes national strategies and federal approaches and things like that. And I understand in the Indian context, there are even bigger challenges. But the main takeaway for us is in such an emphatically jurisdictional country as Canada, when it comes to education and skills training, is that we need regional responses when it comes to developing any kind of skills training. So that's about the most helpful takeaway we've had to date. But when it comes to this, that's where at least I'll start.
So thanks, Matthew. And Matt, would you like to add?
Sure, Maria. Maybe I would just add, Maria, that from an institutional perspective, I think that it's such a good question, because I do think that there are things that we teach that will be very difficult, if not impossible, to replicate online. And I spoke a little bit about the fact that in things like medicine and dentistry and health professions, we will not be able to move everything to online. But music, frankly, is another great example, or dance. And so what I would say about that is I think that this is one of the reasons why it's so important as institutions that we're able to sort of build a consensus around the strategies we're using to deal with COVID, and then set some priorities, because the fundamental things we need to be able to do to manage COVID or maintain enough physical space for the number of people that are in it, so that they're not too close together in prolonged ways, and so on. And so if we want to be able to leave some space for in-person activities, then we need to think carefully about the kinds of priorities we set in our institutional responses to COVID. And that includes not only the kinds of disciplines, but also the people who have access to them. So I think we have to be very mindful of those things in priority setting our strategies.
Maria, can I just say one thing on the rural, on the divide question, that between the urban and rural areas and across, I saw a lot of questions on the digital divide. So, we cannot just erase the digital divide in the short run. So it has to be all of those platforms that we have, the digital, the mobile phone, the TV, the radio, and the community radio. And, radio is such a powerful medium. I think Matt said that the old has become new again, and radio is one of those things which has a huge history of teaching, but we've lost it as I mean, we've kind of de-invested from the radio. So radio, community radio, TV, digital, phone, offline, all of these have to come together. And that's why I was saying, the real challenge in this digital world is the connections. Without everything being connected, we're not going to be able to advance a digital world. So that is a challenge, but that's also the opportunity.
The digital divide, I'll just add from our experiential learning research, is also just a generational divide that we often don't necessarily realize. We know from apprenticeship training in Canada that older generation prefers to actually talk to people and talk to the apprentices, whereas the young students prefer to text and be online for everything. And so it's digital divide, but it's also just a generational one. So.
That's, I think, a lovely point to end on, the generational difference between the teacher and the learner and the digital divide. On that note, I will hand over to Dr. Sandeep Jain. Is he available, sir? I can see that Dr. Saha is here.
Yes, Maria, I'm here. Thank you.
Yeah, sir, I would like to hand over to you for the vote of thanks.
Thank you. So, good evening, all. Thank you very much, all the panelists, for sharing wonderful ideas. I'll quickly summarize few points. We are in the process of shaping of new normal. Yes, we are in the process. We need to explore new normal. We have adapted well so far and need to work hard to deal with the changed situation. We have to work hard on online pedagogies, multiple sources, multiple e-resources, both synchronous and asynchronous. And we have to work on assessment tools also. We have to inculcate capacities in students to distinguish between high quality content and low quality content. We have to focus on social and emotional aspect of students and teachers too. And the last point is, we need to work on digital divide. Yes, divide is there. We need to explore multiple resources like radio and television. So thank you very much, all the panelists, who have enlightened us, gave wonderful ideas. Thank you all panelists and Maria, and thank you all my colleague officers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you once again.
Thank
And
you.
we have to be connected in a different forum and in new form.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you again. Stay well.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Shivaji. Thanks to everyone. Very nice.
Thank you everyone. Thank you everyone. Good evening and have a nice
Thank you.
day.
Thank you, Will. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thanks to everyone. Thank you very much for wonderful session. Bye. Good night.
Thank you, CBSE, for conducting such a wonderful training on such a needed topic. There is the future of education post-COVID. Good night.